Hey guys, Adam from Propy, episode 118 weekly webinar, doing a traditional market check-in. You guys know me. I love talking about real estate, whether it's here in St. Louis, whether it's in Denver, California, all over the place. So we've got two realtors who are high producers in their marketplace. They're both my friends. So it's like a group of people hanging out that we love to see. Shelly, I'm going to start with you. I know you're the biggest, best broker in all of Colorado, but tell the audience what you do for EXP and what your market looks like.
Okay, well, Adam, thank you so much for having me, and I love being part of the Propy family. I'm Shelly Vincent. I'm the designated managing broker for EXP for the entire state of Colorado. I manage over 1,500 real estate agents, along with the help of an amazing team. We did over $5.6 billion in real estate closings last year. We're still doing great this year, but there are some tremendous changes in the market here. And one of the biggest challenges we're facing right now is to help our agents adjust to the market conditions and help them still stay strong, regardless of whether we're in a buyer's or seller's market.
I was on the call with a couple of EXP agents last week, it might have been Friday, and I said, if only EXP could figure out how to grow their agent count. And I was kidding because that's the best ever. And the agents were like, well, I think we're doing pretty good. I said I was being sarcastic, but kudos to you. I've been out to your marketplace. We actually did an event you hosted maybe 90 days ago. It's probably the best crypto real estate event I'd ever attended. It was packed wall to wall, high class, good donuts. You get me, Ross. If you have good donuts at an event, I'm halfway there to happy. So our other guest is Ross Belt. Ross is a partner in his own real estate practice. He also works with a group of guys at Three Doors Realty here in St. Louis, one of the largest investors, rehabbers, flippers. He also sells a ton of traditional houses. Ross, let everyone know what you do here in St. Louis.
Yeah, that's high praise. Thanks, Adam. Thank you for having me. So my name is Ross Belt. I am a real estate agent here in St. Louis. I work for a company, Keller Williams Chesterfield, which is one of the biggest brokerages here in town. And then I also work for a company called Three Doors, which is a big investment company. And so while they buy houses, flip them, buy and hold, they also loan money to other investors. And so me personally, I do a lot of traditional real estate. And then I also kind of walk the tightrope of the investment world and basically buying and selling houses on my own to hopefully retire one day.
So Ross is the guy that if I ever have questions about an investment property, what to do with this house, anybody else has a problem, I call Ross, because the joke I have is he's walked through 1,000 houses and flipped about half of them. So he's kind of tore hundreds of houses down to the studs, rebuilt them. So he knows more about real estate than I ever will. So guys, I don't want to get too heavy on crypto and NFTs and dig too deep. We could if you wanted to, but it feels like we do that a lot. I want to talk about kind of like old school real estate. I'm in a really, really exciting time. It feels like the market's at a really interesting crossroads. We're coming back to what I would consider a really good market versus the crazy good market we had. But Shelly, let's kind of start off. I know you guys have some statistics, but let me ask you the most obvious question, Shelly. How do you teach a realtor who's never had to market a home, to never had to actually work with a home seller for more than 45 days? Like, do you have to teach a whole young crop of realtors or newer crop of realtors of how to set expectations and actually how to manage listings?
Well, 30% of all agents in Colorado right now have been licensed less than 3 years. So you better believe we've got a
so let me think
challenge.
about that. So that's a really good stat. Nearly a third of all realtors in Colorado have only seen basically this boom market.
Correct. Correct. It's a big challenge for us, and the number one teaching moment is setting expectations, especially with the sellers now. We have an increase of days on market now. We don't have those competitive bidding situations. It's still very much a seller's market. But we have agents who don't have a clue what a normal market is, where a house is normally on a market 3 to 6 months. How it's normally, I've had agents make comments on listing prices. That's way too high to start. Well, they don't even understand the concept of a listing price not being a starting bid. And so we have to really teach the art of negotiation, presentations, and I get the amount of emails I get's insane, and they've gone up tenfold in the last couple of weeks with open house notices and broker opens and things we haven't seen for years in this market. And so it's really time for me and my team to expand our classes. We're working with our agents daily and trying to reset those expectations and creating those learning opportunities to adjust with the market, because you're not going to survive if you try to keep doing things the way you have been, because we're in a different market now.
Yeah. And I think it probably happens on the inverse. Probably now a few people are getting buyers who want to throw out low ball offers, and you say, hey, listen, we still aren't we're not going to low ball offers. We might get lucky if we pay full price.
Right.
But I've by the way, I've given this nugget out and no one's ever taken it yet, but it feels like we're bringing the joy back to buying again. We're trying to be able to look at a house, maybe actually go to lunch and then put an offer in and still be available. Or I don't know, look at a house and look at it again.
Yeah.
I keep telling all these companies, you can take my slogan, bringing the joy back to buying, but no one's taking me up on it. Ross, what are you doing for your sellers here in St. Louis? For those of you who don't know, I'm in St. Louis. Ross lives maybe 10 miles away here in St. Louis. Feels like the market's still pretty hot from what I'm seeing, but what are you seeing here, Ross?
Yeah, here in St. Louis, the market still is really good. There obviously has been changes with the interest rates spiking a couple points in the last couple months, but as here anyways, as far as the average sale price goes, it's been staying pretty consistent. We're about at 101% of the actual list price right now. So I think our biggest challenge here, whether I'm dealing with a buyer or a seller, has just been trying to talk people that are either selling into not renting, you know what I mean, and kind of convincing them that it's still okay to buy, or just new buyers or anything that it still makes sense to buy over rent right now, even though the interest rates have been raised.
The rental data will show you that there's no reprieve in renting. You're still better off even with 6% rates.
Yep.
And that's why people say we're going to a housing recession. No, rent is incredibly high. Money is relatively inexpensive at 6%, and the demand is still through the roof. And so it's actually just the opposite of 2008, but a lot of people want to kind of paint that picture. Shelly, you got any Denver data statistics? I love a good statistic to kind of get me going. You got any data about the Denver market?
Well, our active inventory is up 65%, which is massive. Our days on market is up. Our average close price, median close price is unchanged over last year. And the number of closed homes is down 12%. So you would think just with those numbers that it would seem alarming in nature. But a year ago, we were looking at about 25 buyers for every one house on the market, just maddening bidding wars, people paying significantly over the value of a home to get it. And I think that it's just like you said, what we're seeing now is a race to normal, where, we still have maybe 5 buyers for every home right now, even with the high prices, even with the higher interest rates. It is still very much a seller's market. We still have a long way to go before we enter a different type of territory in that. And so I think that some normalizing is great. It will just be managing the expectations during this process.
Yeah, well said. So let me dig a little bit deeper though, Shelly. It reminds me a little bit of when I was a young sales guy and I'd have a bad month. I'd be like, oh, but we're up 12%. And then my boss would say, yeah, but that's like $900. Like, what's the real numbers? Mm-hmm. The percentages always play with it, sound good. So what is the absorption rate or the kind of days on market now in Denver? Do you have that?
Well, it's just from like 8 to 11. It's really, it's not that much, but
30%.
So we're looking at a 30%. And so in what you and I would call a normal market, it's normally 60 to 90 days. we are still very much in a seller's market. But like I said, because a very large portion of the real estate agents have never operated in that, they don't understand what a normal market is like, what the expectations are, or how to set them. So I think that you're seeing a whole lot of panic out there, just for lack of experience, where those of us who have a lot more experience and remember the 2008 market are going to have to work to lead these newer agents through this so that they can understand how to appropriately price and set expectations, especially with their sellers.
Yeah, 2008 was not a lot of fun for those of us who had to deal with it. It's interesting. That's actually, I would have, if you felt the temperature of the industry, especially considering some of the prop tech and fintech layoffs that have happened, you'd think that the little chicken little the sky was falling. Those are really good numbers. They're really robust numbers. So it's I think, to your point, it's kind of a race back to normal. And I think that's the expectation. I do think that I do feel bad for people who missed that great interest rate lock in, because if you're buying now, 90 days ago, you could have got it at 2.5, 300 basis points difference. That does kind of suck. But other than that, give it 90 days, people forget what the rates used to be. They'll focus on the new normal. Ross, I know you guys over at Three Doors, and you specifically, do a tremendous amount of consulting, helping with investors. You've, like I mentioned earlier, have done a tremendous amount of that yourself. Are investors coming back yet? Are they still kind of on the sidelines? What's the deal with the investor market?
Well, I think now that I think the biggest change with the interest rates and where the investors are is I think we're going to see more flips and less buy and hold if the interest rates continue the way it is. Reason being is, like at the house that I just bought, I'm working on right now, I was actually going to hold on to it, and it's basically like a $430,000 house. It was going to rent out for about $2,500, and I was going to be into it for like $310. And so my mortgage interest, or my interest rate, or my mortgage payment was going to be around $1,800, which was going to cash flow me like $700 a month. Now that, that's jumped up like 2.5 points, my monthly payment's like $2,400, so it really doesn't make sense for me to hold on to it. And I think You're going to see quite a bit of that as far as, guys that want to buy and hold it really doesn't make sense for them to do it anymore.
Especially if they're borrowing, it's hard money. Although, let me go ahead and tell you what everybody in America is thinking right now, Ross. How in the hell do you have a nice house for $400,000? In Denver, you don't have, they're all, 900 to $1 million. Mm-hmm. The West Coast, they're looking at us like we must live in trailers. Listen, folks, here in St. Louis, you get a lot of house for your money. That's no just doubt. A fact. That's why we choose to live in the flyover state. So when you live in Santa Barbara, New Orleans, Miami, and you're paying $600 a square foot, that's not what we have to deal with here. So what about you, Shelly? I know you deal with every type of buyer. Are you seeing investors do anything different? Is it still light? Are they still waiting on the sidelines? What has your experience been with the investment market?
There's a lot of heavy competition for investment properties in our market, and I work with a lot of investors. Right now, what I'm seeing is the investors, when they are negotiating for a property, they're looking for a bigger margin right now, for a little bit more security than they were. And so they're not willing to pay as much for a fix and flip as they were. We're seeing that with our iBuyers, Home Partners of America homes. We are definitely seeing them back off on being as aggressive as they were, which is part of that softening market that we are seeing. But even with the interest rates, I remember buying my first house about 1993 and being thrilled with a 7.25% interest rate. And so I think we as agents have to put into perspective interest rates historically and where they are. Is it more than what we're used to paying? Yes. Is it as high as we've ever paid? Not even close. And so we just have to put those expectations in place. I think you're going to see some arms come back into play. We've definitely seen a lot of programs come online for being able to lock your rates long term for new builds, things like that. So the market always adjusts. And like you were mentioning the layoffs earlier, I think that's really the refi market that was affected more than anything else. I think that the shortening of all the refis is what affected a lot of these companies that you saw with those layoffs, as long as the interest rates are this high, you're just not going to see many refis at all.
Yeah, I had a really smart lender tell me that the lending group basically did 5 years worth of loans and refis in 2 years. And so when you pull that much volume out, you're going to hit some slowdown. But it feels a little bit, it's funny. I was talking to one of my old colleagues that I used to work with at the beginning of the pandemic. Brokerage, especially traditional brokers, are very funny. Anytime they hear a little a bump in the road, a little bit of maybe a malaise in the economy, they instantly go to reducing 10% of workforce. And there's been a couple of traditional real estate companies that put on hiring freezes and have laid some people off. But it's the same group of people that also in, March of the pandemic 2 years ago laid a bunch of people off because they thought real estate was going to fall apart during the pandemic. So a lot of these layoffs are not always indicative of what's about to happen. But I was one of the groups that, we ran a large sales division that sold into real estate. And we thought in March of 2020 that we were going to have really tough times ahead. And we were not wrong. We were dead wrong. So with that being said, Shelly, I know you and I love to geek out about the crypto markets. Finally, something good to talk about this week.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I love, personally, I love seeing the markets coming back, but it was inevitable that they were going to recover some. I do compare this a lot to the old .com bust, the early 2000s. We had many people surge onto the market. We had companies that were built on more value than others. We finally saw a filtering, which was bound to happen. And the strongest ones are surviving. It's coming back, and as you and I have discussed, people take for granted the blockchain technology on which cryptocurrency finds its value. Yeah. And the applications that are arising from the technology or where the value is coming from. And we're seeing it across so many different industries. Real estate is not even the highest level of application for blockchain right now. Right. And it's just going to explode. So it has nowhere else to go but up.
Yeah, people tend to, what is that saying, throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you think of bathwater as crypto and crypto speculation, the baby is blockchain. It's not going to go anywhere. And if you look at blockchain applications, right now we're just in layer 0. But if you look at some of the layer 1 and layer 2 things as applies to real estate, it's really, really interesting for some of us. For 90% of Americans, it's insanely boring. But I have a bad habit of saying things are really interesting, and everybody at my dinner table looks at me like, if we have one more discussion about NFTs, I'm going to go crazy. So I think it's really interesting, the blockchain as it relates to real estate. I think the crypto part, a lot of your negative people or your naysayers love to point out when that struggles, because they're not really smart enough to delineate the crypto from the blockchain. They just want to lump it all together as something that's uncomfortable to them. So like, I think you and I were talking about it on Monday. It's been a good week. It's Ethereum especially has had a really good week, which for those who follow Propy know that that's kind of my favorite Web3 company. So it's been good.
Well, the applications you can write on it. To me, it's all about the applications.
Yeah, I do think the lack of centralization. So the beauty of Ethereum is it's decentralized, and the challenge with both Ethereum and Bitcoin is it's decentralized. And so some of these chains that have more centralization, the ability to maneuver, make decisions, change quicker, they will scale a lot quicker. But it's just, if you look at the amount of talent right now, people coding smart contracts, they're mostly on Ethereum. And so until that changes, which it will eventually, and I'm not one of these guys who gets into a blockchain love fest, who likes what, but I do think that it's going to have a nice rebound. So but let's circle back on real estate just a little bit more, because I think we often overlook some of the most basic aspects of, Ross, do you think we're going to go back to a point where realtors have to get creative or actually have to say, okay, how am I going to help market this house beyond putting it into MLS and putting a yard sign in front? Are we getting into an area where we have to market more aggressively? And if so, what does that look like?
Well, I tell you, I think we're a long way still away from it, as Shelly had said earlier. It's still very much a seller's market. It's going to be interesting to see, if that does happen, but I still think that's at least a year or two down the road, considering that it still goes in the current trend that it's going. So
have you Oh, sorry, Russ.
ahead.
Have you noticed a pickup though on people skipping appraisals, people stopping with the inspection? Are you people going back to putting on home warranties, getting inspections, or is it still just the same Wild West where we're not doing any of these things?
Yeah, I think it slowed down a little bit. So it's not quite as like 20, instead of 25 offers on a house, you've got, 3 or 4. So while you're still having to offer, quite a bit above list, you're not having to rip the appraisal rider, rip the inspections, and close in, whatever, 30 days. So it's getting closer back to even halfway normal. But it's still competitive on good houses.
Let me ask you this while I've got you, Ross, because I know you deal with a lot of contractors, deal with a lot of laborers, you deal with a lot of materials shortages. You guys are tearing houses down the studs, rebuild them. Has that supply chain softened? So like just take it from a builder's perspective. Has their supply chain or the general contractor supply chain, is it come back to normal or is it still really choppy? I don't know the answer.
Still choppy and materials are still really high. And I mean, just skill, any kind of skilled, labor has just kind of gone down. So, good help is really hard to find. So I think that, that's kind of been an issue that, it's going to have, as Shelly alluded to earlier, as far as buying the properties, people have to have discipline. There's still a lot of competition to buy them, and you got to have discipline to buy them right, and not overpay for them, because it really puts you in a bad spot if you do.
That was an interesting thing you said earlier, Shelly. And I think I understood it as before the market slowed down a bit, you had a lot of margin for error buying and flipping. But you're saying now that they think that the gap has tightened, and so people are a little bit more judicious about that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think it's uncertainty right now that we're seeing with the market. As Russ is saying, the hard money loans that carry the high interest, you've got more days on market now. They may have to hold the home longer before it sells. They're wanting to protect their margins that were already pretty thin to begin with, because we have such a competitive investor market here as well. And what I'm seeing is a pretty across the board unified slight drop in what the competition has been. The same thing with the waiving inspections, things like that. And I am advising my agents that we're not where we were a year ago. We're still in a seller's market. It is still competitive, but not to the point that you have to be ready to give up as much as you were before. There's much more room for negotiation than there was a year ago. And that's a great thing for both buyer and seller.
Yeah, well said. It's interesting where I think on a macro level is if you look at all the investment money that's went into the brokerage level, and Shelly, you sit on the executive level of one of the biggest brokerages in America, maybe the fastest growing brokerage in America. All the money that's been poured into it. In 2021, it looked really good. 2022, it looks really good because the market's so, robust. But at some point when the market slows down, it's a little bit of musical chairs. When the agent count stops growing and actually starts going backwards, volumes come back to normal. There's a lot of debt that's going to be called against a lot of these major brokerages. Do you ever get the feelings a little bit of musical chairs with all the debt that most of the major brokerages are coming on, or do you just kind of stay out of that?
Well, I am extremely happy to be with EXP. EXP is a debt-free company. We have no debt compared to all the other brick and mortars. So I'm very fortunate to be with a company going into a changing market in the great financial position that we're in. EXP is still growing. We're still hiring. We just crossed 83,000 agents this last week. So for me, I happen to be very fortunate with the company that I'm with, but I believe that we're going to see a lot of mergers and acquisitions. I think smaller companies are going to probably go the wayside that don't have that strong financial backing going in. And one of the things we do see is when markets shift like this, agents that were struggling to begin with, they for some reason think that switching brokerages will make their business grow.
Yeah.
And so we do see a lot of movement, but we also see a lot of movement inward. And so it's a job for me and my team that we're always in contact with our agents to make sure that they know the value of where they're at, and to reach out to them to say, hey, how can we help you with your business? And get them to take personal responsibility of growing their business, because it doesn't matter where they are. It's their own brand. It's how they market themselves as to how they get to their success.
Yeah, ironically, I think the brokerages that empower agents and teams to brand and market themselves the best once they're in market are both KW and EXP. I know a tremendous amount of EXP agents that have kind of rebranded, powered by EXP, and the same thing even with Keller Williams. Ross, I'll pick on you a little bit. You and your guys over at Three Doors, they're powered by Keller, but it's really a Three Doors team. And I think there's a certain level of beauty to letting those brokers and agents be autonomous and, powered by the brand, using the brand technology, using the great tools that they provide, but letting them kind of build their own business in the marketplace. And people forget 16 years ago on a yard sign, you had to have your office landline on the yard sign. Like you couldn't even have a cell phone number on there. It had to be the office landline. 15 or years less ago, your name had to be smaller than the broker's name on a yard sign. So the way technology has made the process better for homeowners is black and white, pretty obvious. But the way it's also given the realtors more power back to be able to kind of grow their business, agnostic of any brand is really interesting. All right, guys. So what we typically do is we wrap this 30 minutes up live, and then we open it up to the people on the webinar. So Shelly, if I'm watching this today or down the road on the social medias, the socials of the world, and I want to reach out to you, how could I find you?
Well, I'm on Facebook, Shelly Vincent. I'm on LinkedIn. I can also be reached by email. It's Shelly, SHELLY.Vincent@exprealty.net. And I'd be happy to speak with anyone who's really interested in the crypto market, what's happening here. I do teach a 2-hour CE crypto class, which is how I know Adam so well, and big proponent. I am a Propy certified agent as well. It is a niche market that the more we learn about it and take the time to understand the vocabulary that goes with it, the better that we can assist our clients with it. So I'm really excited to be a part of this movement. And Adam, thank you so much for having me today. Anybody who wants to reach out, I'm very happy to talk to anyone who's interested in learning.
Ross, if anyone wants to buy, sell, invest, learn about investing, hard money lending here in the Missouri area, how would they get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have just my personal Facebook page, which is Ross Belt, but then I also have a business page, which is Belt Properties Network. And then my email is rossbelt@beltproperties.com. So yeah, feel free to reach out anytime. Anybody that's looking just to buy, sell, or invest, or want to learn of anything in the above, happy to help if I can. And yeah, thank you so much, Adam, for having me.
No problem. If people emailed you their golf swings, would you send them back a critique of said golf swing?
Only left-handed swings.
If I did it in a mirror and sent it to you, you'd be good.
Right.
All right. Thanks everybody for coming on. Propy 118, 2 really awesome guests, great realtors, great smart real estate minds, and also my friends, which makes it a lot of fun for me. So Propy 118, thanks for having us.
All right. We'll see you next week for the next webinar. Thank you, Shelly and Ross.
Absolutely.
Are we going to open it up to the team? I haven't seen my boy Ted yet.
Hold on. I'm going to